Welcome to another episode of the Devil's Rest Book Club, where we dive into the details of Christopher Rocchio's Sun Eater series and the universe. It is I, your teenage biker host, Cameron, and is with me, as always, is the night lictor of our podcast himself, Drew. Drew, how you doing?
I am doing well. And this week we're going to be covering chapters 7 through 9 of the first book of the series, Empire of Silence.
So when we left Hadrian last, give us a synopsis of what we talked about last time.
Yeah, so last time we talked about some interesting stuff that was crowned off by a fantastic final chapter where Hadrian is sort of feeling disgusted with the violence and the way that the world works. Amidst the scene and the Colosso that he is watching as his brother is going down to actually participate into the event, he makes a decision to step away both literally and figuratively from his role and to separate himself and to kind of forge his own path. And
He
so,
makes the decision to give up
Yeah.
the Game of Thrones for
that's right.
his father's job. And, now that I've thought about it a little bit more, especially the way that you synthesized that last part of it last episode, you may be right. It could potentially rival chapter 1 in terms of just everything that's in there that I'm sure that we'll reference back to. It may be one of those chapters that we come back to, one of those pieces that we come back to a lot in future books.
Yeah, the subtext is pretty massive. Yeah.
But today we begin with Hadrian leaving Colossus. So he said, I'm done, giving it up.
Yeah.
It's Crispin's to have. He's no longer, I didn't want it. I just wanted Crispin to lose it. He's resigned himself to moving on. And he begins by leaving Colosso and then going on what I will affectionately call one of his moody, melodramatic, introspective sections, right? He's just thinking to himself, walking through all this different stuff as he leaves the Colosso. And now normally he's left the box.
Yeah.
And as part of it, he decides to, rather than just like fly home, he decided he's going to walk. And he sort of sees it as like this little rebellion against his father. It's like, screw you, Dad, I'm going to walk home. I don't know. It just is.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that being who he is, that's sort of seen as a rebellious thing on his side, knowing that there are potential dangers with him doing so.
Yeah, it's once again we kind of get where Hadrian is coming from. And also at this point in the story, it's like the most naive version of we get where he's coming from. It's like I hear your point, but you're being very naive and sort of silly. And so yeah, I mean he wanders out, and funnily enough, I mean it's a fantastic thing that he does this just for the introspective stuff that ends up happening, I think, which is most clearly laid out with the subject of cruelty at the start of this chapter. There's discussion about what it takes to lead and sort of the violence and cruelty necessary for it. He's discussing internally like his lack of ability to participate in sort of a system that requires cruelty, which is interesting given what we know about Hadrian's future, right? So we have this juxtaposition of like where he's at with what we know of what Hadrian becomes. So very interesting. Gives us another one of these big question marks that just keeps happening in this first novel here. Is like, how does this guy who can't watch people fight in the Colosseum become the Sun Eater?
Genocidal tyrant. Yeah.
Right. Like how does that make sense? How do we go on that journey? So interesting
He's
stuff.
very, very, very idealistic at this point, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, the older I get, the less idealistic I get.
Definitely.
I still consider myself more of an idealist than not, but I feel like as time moves on, realism sort of sets in. And Hadrian, I can't imagine what that's like on a Palatine scale, right? Because they live hundreds of years. How long does that adolescence period really extend? But
it's interesting. And there's the contrast between the young and old Palatine, right? Because like if you have someone who is, 18-year-old teenager doing teenager stuff next to their 500-year-old father, it's almost like it's the contrast sort of couldn't be larger. Yeah, I mean, you have
Hmm.
35, 40-year-old parents in our world being frustrated at the naivete and bad decisions of their 18-year-olds. I can't imagine being 400 years old and having to figure out how to navigate tolerating the imperfections of adolescence. I mean, it'd be pretty interesting it's not really explicitly directly explored, but I mean, it has huge implications for like familial relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah, we may see a little bit more of the other side of it when we get to the lesser devil, as you mentioned last time. He's walking, and like part of this melodramatic internal dialogue that he's having with himself is something that struck me was it feels as if almost now that he's made this decision, he's almost trying to justify it to himself constantly
Mm,
as he's going on this walk. Like he's trying to fill that void now that he has like resigned himself to not being part of this succession game that has occupied him for at least the last 6 chapters of the book, but probably longer, right? Like it's probably been a thing his entire life based on what the conversations have been like. And it's been a competition ever since Kristen came out of the vat
yeah.
to some extent.
It's interesting because as he's walking, the feeling that I got was like sort of like isolated, sort of Hadrian. It's it's interesting because he doesn't feel at home at home, but
Yeah.
walking through the streets as well, he's also not like it feels, and he's pondering about it. He feels like he clearly doesn't belong there either.
He's transient. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting.
But I mean, and sort of that goes back to I think in earlier chapters when he talks about his mother's desire to be near windows and desire to be anywhere else, right?
Yeah,
Is that now he has resigned himself to not be part of this succession game. What does the next step look like? He's made the decision. You know, he's quit his job without getting another job. So he's kind of I don't know what to do next.
yeah,
And as he's walking down the streets, he peppers in this internal monologue with descriptions of what the serfs are like, the plebeians, and all the people around him. I think he mentions like the fact that there's a Nipponese man, so Japanese analog, who rolls fish with rice. There's a sushi maker down by the
yeah.
wharf or whatever that he used to frequent, probably in the company of like soldiers in
Mm,
his father's employ. But there's this interesting part where he is looking at these serfs in a boat that are like rowing home, and behind them is this like giant tanker with the Marlowe Devil on it. And he just thinks to himself, I think the quote is, the serfs didn't stand a chance. Just noting the fact and hammering home the idea that nobility's grip on power is inextricably linked to their ability to restrict technology to being in the hands of the lowest people. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in 2 chapters from now.
it's worth commenting on how good the writing in this section is as well. Like people that will be listening to this that have read it, it's just really good world building. I mean,
Mhm.
like as you sort of have Rocchio describe the world. I mean, it feels very alive and very lived in as he's walking through this place. I mean, it's part Hadrian's journey, but it's also just like feel how alive like these regular people's life is
Yeah.
amidst this gigantic galactic thing. It's this small versus large juxtaposition thing that this book does as well that I also really like. It's just good writing. I mean, you probably just read this whole section. It's like, wow, this guy's like really good at making this little town feel like alive, and it's really really
Yeah.
good. It's fantastic.
As he's walking along, he's noting these sites that we've mentioned and talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
them
Too
as
many
he
to
passes
list.
them by. Too many to
Yeah,
list. And then he notices the fact that like comes to the realization after he's already assuming like a mile or two into this walk, or maybe even farther, not enough to like realize and turn around, but he's dressed like a Palatine. Like he does not look like everybody else.
yeah,
He mentions their skin and how their like skin is like leather and his is like super pale. And even though he's short for a Palatine, assuming like 6'2", 6'3", I guess, he doesn't, I don't know if it explicitly says, but he's tall
yeah,
among these people.
yeah,
He's tall, he's pale. It's like as if a tall vampire in nice clothes would be walking down the street. So he's sticking out like a sore thumb to some extent. And it just comes to him as he's in the middle of the walk, like this probably wasn't the smartest decision, safest decision. And in doing so decides that I'm not going to go down this detour. I probably shouldn't be walking down that way. And it sort of indicates in his adolescence, he doesn't, and we've already seen it with the way that he has handled business that his father has given him with other things. He does not understand the consequences of his actions, clearly, right? There's a lack of
Yeah.
foresight when he
Yeah.
makes these super emotional decisions that lead to unforeseen consequences that we as the reader can recognize, like, bro, that's not very smart. Why are you doing that? But at the time, him being so young and brash, it just doesn't occur to him that bad things could happen to him.
Are you frustrated by Hadrian at this point in the story? Something I hear often from people about the first book is that they're frustrated with the character of Hadrian precisely because of this naivete and brash sort of attitude. My experience with him, even up to this point where we're about to get in the midst of like the consequences of naivete, I find him an interesting character at this point, given what he is, taking him for what he is, despite the brash decision making and stuff. I don't find it frustrating at all.
I don't find it frustrating either, especially, I mean, again, upon first read through, it's like, okay, why is this important? But,
Yeah.
Rocky is writing for the reread, very much so. And this is really coming back to it, is giving us an indication of like, oh, this is the person that will become the narrator. I actually really like on this read through the interplay between narrator Hadrian and when he steps in to say, like,
Yeah.
reflectively, I was this way and I'm not that way. Presumably I'm not that way anymore based on what we know.
They're deeply different characters. It's evident through his commentary of like, listen, dude, this is not what I'm saying right now is wrong for the record. Like he corrects himself.
But if we're thinking about it, like in terms of like, this is a real world document in this universe, I bet it'd be shocking to read. This would be the equivalent of like a,
oh, interesting. Yeah.
I don't know, humanizing a dictatorial figure from the 20th century, right? Like a memoir or a diary coming out from Stalin or Hitler or somebody like that, when you're like, oh, it would be like reading that, right? Almost.
Yeah. And he's just being a teenager.
Yeah. And to be fair, at least in Hadrian's case, and in most people's case, he's a 20-year-old kid. Now, we don't know how the genetics work in this case, but I'm assuming his prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet, right? So I think that the point in talking about these actions is to give us that indication that I was naive. It's Hadrian admitting it, the fact that he's even starting here in the story. He could have started it later, but he decided to give the full picture. Something I noticed, I wonder, okay, I think it's a reference, but his wrist terminal, do you think it's a reference to like a Pit-Boy in Fallout? Like that's the first thing I thought on this read through. It's like he's got a fancy Pit-Boy.
I didn't even think about that, actually.
Yeah.
I actually don't know what the prevalence of wristbound technology is in science fiction. I actually don't know if it extends beyond Fallout or if that's like the most present.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it does, but
it's really hard with Rockio because he's like, oh yeah, I love like Platonic classical Roman literature and also like Berserk. It's like
Digimon, yeah.
Right. So it's like everywhere in Digimon, and literally like it's literally important that he likes like Japanese stuff like that. So it's I wouldn't put it past him, frankly. He's pulling modern media and stuff just in this as well. It's actually it's at least similar.
Well, cool. Something we do know though is that this would be uncommon for a plebeian to have, right? Because they are restricted on technology. Now, it doesn't explicitly say that they don't have access to the sec, but we can assume with how the chantry and they work, they probably do not. The majority of people do not.
There's no way. Yeah.
And so
that would be surprising.
On top of him looking like a 6'3" tall vampire with raven black hair as he's walking down the street, he's got a wrist terminal and this signet ring on it with like the symbol of his house. And I think it mentions the fact that like his signet ring, later we come to find out it's got terabytes of data and encryptions, and like it's a way important piece. It's an interesting take to like the signet ring in human history, with how it was used as sort of the symbol of the ruler. But also, I think that potentially like this focus on the signet ring could also be not only that, but a callback to the importance of the ducal ring in Dune, right? Sort of when Hadrian has the ring, he is of the people. And that's a big part in Paul Atreides' story, is when he gets the ring back to signify like the concatenation, the bringing together of Paul, Muad'Dib and Paul Atreides together.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we'll see like an inversion.
Yeah, I was going to say it's an interesting inversion with Dune. I actually hadn't considered that, but it's a very different arc. Like you know, people compare this to Dune and they're like, oh, there's a ring. It's like, yes, but this is a very different relationship with there's a sense in Dune that's very different thematically to what's
Yeah.
going on right now
Yeah.
about Hadrian's separation and lack of desire to fulfill or play this role at all. Yeah.
It's interesting too. He specifically calls out a moment like right before the major action in this chapter where this woman offers to braid his hair because he's got long hair, and he mentions the fact that like it was popular among the Palatine and among the higher classes to have your hair short, but he has his hair long like his dad that he mentions later.
Yeah.
I had to look him up. He politely declines her. I imagine it's like walking up to a homeless woman and like declining, being polite and declining, and then she just screams at you. In this case, she calls him a catamite, which means specifically the pubescent boy in a pederastic relationship. So like she sees this long-haired guy, offers to braid his hair, presumably for money, and then when he politely declines, he's like, you know, and calls him a slur on the street. And,
Yeah.
you know, he
Yeah.
he sort of walks on and is like, I wanted to yell at her and tell her, well, your Archon has long hair. How would you feel about that? And he
Yeah.
doesn't do it because he comes to the realization that's what's the worth. But after that, we sort of get this emergent theme as this is sort of an indication of him assessing the plebeians, like as he's walking by, rowing the boat, seeing this woman, seeing their skin, seeing the way that they look in the
Yeah.
comparison to him.
Yeah.
This emerging theme that like are they more human or is he more human? Like he's lab grown and he's like an angel among these people. Is he more human or are they something that only nature could create? Does that make them more
Yeah.
human?
And the emerging feeling that I was experiencing reading this was that they are, in truth.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
things that he did. And I think this is sort of a thought that's occurring to him is it's like, he's like,
Narrator
this is
Hadrian.
like, yeah, he's like, this is really weird. I'm walking through this thing. I don't fit in here for
Mhm.
like good reasons, like not just like trivial stuff.
Yeah.
Like I do, like there's all sorts of things about me that make me stick out. I'm not just like a rich kid walking through a bad neighborhood. I am literally different genetically than these people, and it's
Mhm.
obvious to everyone. And we start to get a little bit of tension developing, and just like from the sore thumbness of this, it just feels like not good. And one of the most interesting things I didn't realize, like we have the ship of Theseus
Yeah.
referenced here at this point in the chapter. This is sort of like I'm sure people will know, like if you do enough Sun Eater stuff or whatever, or you do like a little bit of cursory introduction to philosophy, the ship of Theseus will evidently come up. This is sort of this like idea for people that haven't heard of it is that, you've got this ship and like you're sailing across the ocean, parts of it gradually go bad, you start replacing it. And if you eventually find yourself having replaced the whole ship, is it still the ship of Theseus by the time that you have replaced all of the pieces? There's an intuitive answer which feels like, yeah, it's still kind of the same ship, but there's a secondary question which is like, well, if you took all the old parts and then you put it back together to create a secondary ship, which ship is actually the ship of Theseus? The one that
Yeah.
you started replacing, or the one that you reconstructed from the broken parts of the ship of Theseus in the first place? There's a whole section of philosophy about identity, which is super non-straightforward and confusing,
Mhm.
frankly, that is a really big theme in this series. And it really starts to get hit home for the first time here, which is, I think, why this philosophical thought experiment is brought up. I would toy around with those thoughts, that they're going to come up again throughout this.
Definitely put a pin in it for sure,
Yeah,
especially for book 2.
put a pin in it. Frankly, it's a really complicated way to try to worm your way out of this identity philosophy stuff. When I was studying and minoring philosophy in college, we talked about the philosophy. There's this philosophical point of view called the no self view, which is like, if you deconstruct all of the parts of yourself, you can't find any particular part that actually generates your identity, and therefore there is no self, which
Yeah. Materialistic,
feels
right?
well, the thing that's interesting about it, and it comes up here and will come up again, is that it seems so self-evidently wrong, and yet it's
Mhm.
very hard to point to why is it wrong.
Yeah.
And so it requires exploration to get to something that feels satisfying and makes psychological or maybe even theological sense, frankly. Just how deep this problem goes. And I'm excited to see it prop up this early in the series. I frankly forgot that the ship of Theseus comes up or this early in this book.
Yeah.
It's
I
great.
think it's interesting the fact that, science or mathematics extended to the upper, like when you get to the theoretical, right? The overlap between philosophy and mathematics, or science, like
Yeah.
theoretical physics and mathematics. Sorry, theoretical physics and philosophy, and mathematics and philosophy becomes really evident, right?
Yeah.
And we definitely play more in the sandbox of the philosophy side going through this series, while also dealing with some of the science fiction implications of it, which
Yeah.
this is sort of the first inkling of that. But as he walks down and he's having the same kind of discussion that we're having just internally, right? Like, and
Yeah.
at the time, I think narrator Hadrian specifically talks about the fact that at the time he thought Palatine were more human. And we'll see that as
Mm.
part of his naivete or part of his growth going forwards. Like, how does he not only become this tyrant, but how does he go from thinking that like he's the Ubermensch, the Superman, thinking that these people that live an eighth, a tenth, a hundredth of his lifespan are actually more human than he could ever be.
Yeah.
As he walks and has these thoughts, and he's thinking also about like the fact that, is it weird that my teeth grow back, right? As a Palatine, these
It's
people's teeth
very,
don't grow back.
very, very weird. It's like one of the
Yeah,
weirdest things about Palatine. It's
yeah,
one of the things that every time it comes up, it feels the most inhuman. Every time it comes up, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. It's interesting that it's not recognizing this, but from our point of view, it's just so alien. It's not like, what would you have to do to a human being to make it so they grow sets of teeth over and over again?
yeah.
It's completely diverged from anything that we are. It's very interesting.
While he's thinking about this and then thinking about the fact that like, well, if there are white teeth, then why did the director have like metal teeth? It doesn't never made sense to me. He's mid thought on this. He wanders down a dark alley, and then like the biker gang from Akira comes down and like hits him with a pipe on these like diesel bikes.
Doing the Akira slide on the whole bit.
Yeah,
It's
kind of his
great.
gang comes out and attacks him.
Yeah.
And instantly we get this sort of view into the Palatine culture that, okay, when faced in danger, I need to stall for time. So he immediately like surreptitiously hits his pit boy and like calls
Yeah.
for help, while also like hands up, okay, I yield. Specifically, it's called out as poin. I don't know if this has a real world analogy, but the definition in book is a structured small scale war between imperial Palatine houses subject to the scrutiny of the Inquisition. So he's talking about the fact that like he's following the rules that he was taught as a kid in the event that you're taken hostage, like Theon Greyjoy gets taken by
Yeah.
the Starks, or, the rules. It's sort of an interesting callback, I think, to Dune, like the rules of Conley, I think it's called in Dune, where like there is a form that you must observe if you're going to be in house war or a faction war. And
Yeah.
so he's following those rules with a biker gang on the street reflexively, something that he's grown up all the time knowing. Coin also, I found this interesting, is Greek for this spirit of punishment, vengeance, and retribution. This is names. Rockulan names are amazing.
It's insane.
Coin is an attendant goddess in some texts to the goddess Nemesis. And the etymology of the word poin in Greek then became poena in Latin, which means pain, which is where we get a word like subpoena. So it might be pena in Latin, I'm not sure. But yeah, the word subpoena means under penalty. So it's like penalty or punishment or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what he calls this sort of faction war thing. I thought it was really interesting.
What I think is really interesting that emerges immediately is like, we have this earlier chapter, this reference to like, oh, it's important that Hadrian learns to duel because it's like important to the Palatine class that we have dueling and we've got all these rules and it's really cool. And you're like, wow, we've got this really complex, like interesting way that violence plays out. And we've got this gigantic empire and the whole bit. And this first experience that we have with like real violence with our character is like not that.
Yeah.
It's like it just yanks him down to earth, for lack of a better frame. And he's like, no, like you're getting jumped in an alleyway and they don't care if you yield. These people they're so far below whatever you should be interacting with that they're not even like thinking about like, oh, this is like good leverage to have. Like you're just wandered into the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, and she's trying to appeal to them in all these ways that make no sense to them. You can't even interface with them in violent interactions because he's so disconnected from what's going on.
Yeah, I think that first thing that they say when he says I yield is fuck yielding. Like, this is our turf or whatever.
It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. It's okay. I'm still going to hit you.
I thought it was worth pointing out, Royce shields are mentioned again here amidst this combat. And I just want to drive this home as I think if what a really meaningful difference is about this universe, we've mentioned it before, is that they're not quite like the shields in Dune. They are similar, but they are not quite like it, which is that the Royce shields will not block something that if humans are essentially capable of swinging that hard, which is different than Dune. You've got the slow blade. In this, basically full range of power that people can do human-wise will go straight through the shield. And so the combat plays out differently. It's mentioned again, it's worth putting a pin in because I think it's particularly important for how the series plays out, implications and stuff. So I feel like it was worth mentioning.
He doesn't have any thing with him other than his main gauche, which the only reason I know this is because of the DLC for Elden Ring, where
no joke.
main gauche is the only parrying weapon that you can get in the Shadowlands. So yeah, it means left hand in French. And so like, I also think that, I mean, another callback, it's got a milk white blade. So, I mean, is that a reference to a Chris knife? Like it kind of is.
That's gotta be the milk white thing. That's gotta be, yeah, it's a Chris knife. That's okay. That's cool.
But he's bringing a knife to a biker lead pipe fight, which, you know, he's definitely outmatched still, even though he's like got superhuman strength or whatever. And I think he notes the fact that like, man, if I had my rapier, maybe I could have taken him on. But I mean, I just have my parrying dagger. So I really didn't have that much of a shot.
Yeah.
And another one too, he sort of like thinks about the fact that like, as he gets up from being hit or whatever, this is like a bullfight, which, you know, he's the matador. He's a poor matador though, because he doesn't have a proper sword or a cape to be able to like get these plebeians away and to fool them. And he tells us in the story that apparently bullfighting still happens on Delos in Colosso when there aren't Ashdarks to just kill plebeians, right? When there's no Ashdarks to bait, if they need something, I'm like, all right, we'll get the bulls out and we'll kill a bull. This is clearly to me a reference to the Duke Leto's father, right? Dying at part of a bullfight, right?
Yeah.
Something we didn't notice about these like bikers until then is one of them has the same nose slit. So that's how we tell that people are criminals in this world is like they cut their nose, their nostril to show them clearly. Not only that, he's got literally in their language assault written on his forehead. I thought that was interesting that like not only do they do that, but in this world where genetic modification is so free, that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it probably doesn't happen in this society, but theoretically, those things can be changed about you after the fact in the event that you redeem yourself somehow. But
interesting.
So they basically fight him, they knock him out, and then essentially like look at his terminal and his signet ring and then realize, oh, we are fucked. He's a Marlowe. Screwed. He's a fucking Marlowe. And we are dead. Like it's over for us.
Yeah.
And then he just like has this, you know, these thoughts as he's like passing out essentially.
And then we get another banger.
Yeah.
Final page and a half from Christopher Rocchio. I think it's worth reading. I'll read it very quickly. Certain scholiasts teach that experience is only the sum of its parts, that our lives may be reduced to a set of equations, that they may be factored, weighed, balanced, and understood. They believe that the universe is one of objects and that we are only objects among objects, that even our emotions are no more than electromechanical processes carried out in our brains, accessories to the pressures of bloody-handed evolution. This is why they struggle for the apatheia, the freedom from emotion. This is their great failing. Human beings do not inhabit a world of objects, nor did our consciousnesses evolve to live in such a place. We live in stories, and in stories, we are subject to phenomena beyond the mechanisms of space and time. Fear and love, death and wrath, and wisdom. These are much as parts of our universe as light and gravity. The ancients called them gods, for we are their creatures, shaped by their winds. Sift the sands of the very world and sort the dust of space between them, and you will find not one atom of fear, nor gram of love, nor dram of hatred. Yet they are there, unseen and uncertain as the smallest quanta and just as real. And just like the smallest quanta, they are governed by principles beyond our control. And what is our response to this chaos? We build an empire greater than any known in the known universe. We order that universe, shaping outward nature in accordance with inward law. We name our emperor our god that he might keep us safe and command the chaos of nature. Civilization is a kind of prayer, that by right action we might bring to pass the peace and quiet that is the ardent desire of every decent heart. But nature resists, for even in the heart of so great a city as Media, on so civilized a world as Delos, a young man might simply take a wrong turn and be set upon by brigands. No prayer is perfect, nor any city. It was suddenly very, very cold.
So this clearly, right, is Rocchio's
Answer.
to materialism, right?
Yeah.
If you try and boil everything down to just the base elements that things are made out of,
Yes.
you lose humanity and you lose what makes us human. And I love the fact that he talks about the idea that we live in stories. Like there's this an emerging sort of philosophical thing that started happening in the 20th century that I still think doesn't get talked about enough now, is the relation to story in our lives, right? Story is incredibly important. That's what makes us like this series ultimately too. Is like, what does this story tell us about the reality in our lives? It's masterfully done.
And it's no coincidence that the ship of Theseus comes up alongside the end of this chapter.
Exactly.
The answer is sort of, if we're returning to my brief commentary on the self-way, it was like, technically speaking, you're right. If you deconstruct me or you, there is no Drew or Cameron present in the material, because that's not where it's supposed to be found, is essentially the answer. There is no material for subjective experience. It's great. It's just
fear and hatred
insightful.
And love are comparable to the smallest quantity, like invisible to the human eye, but nevertheless, like still there and still a part of humanity. I love the idea, just as a note before we talk about civilization and like chaos and all this different stuff that he talks about at the end of this. A lot of these words sound like Warhammer 40K. I will make it clear, Christopher Rocchio has stated that he knew nothing about 40K before writing this book in the series. So the God Emperor comparisons or whatever, and the weirdness of like the way chaos works in Warhammer. So all you Warhammer fans that love Warhammer, Drew and I enjoy it. Drew has painted armies.
Not painted, unpainted shame army.
Oh yeah, he has a gray box of shame. Gray pile of shame.
Yeah. Yes.
Built armies at very least. This is not,
built.
we don't get that weird. And it's not a reference to Warhammer specifically.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that he talks about civilization as this kind of prayer that by right action we might bring to pass the peace and quiet that is the ardent desire of every decent heart. The idea that like peace and quiet is the desire of every decent human heart is one that speaks volumes, right? Because I mean, we're normal dudes. That is if you really boil it down, peace and quiet is really what everybody wants. They don't want the noise of all this different stuff. And it sort of like plays on the idea that civilization at a galactic scale this empire is intended and created for that. But going back to your synthesis of the end of the last chapter, even though like the silence in terms of the empire is that lack of moral clarity, like you're saying, but that desire for the empire to have peace and quiet, like that was what built the empire itself. Like it ended up being silence as lack of moral clarity, but the desire at the core was the idea that, everybody just ultimately wants peace and quiet. I loved that.
Oh my, that was blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Put a pin in this, folks.
Yeah. We begin chapter 8, Gibson. So, narrator Hadrian opens up this chapter by basically saying, having this contemplation that like, if you would have died there, like Gododin would still have a son. I think that's the first time that we hear Gododin as like the system or related to the sun that was actually destroyed as the sun that he ate.
Yeah.
And he just thinks about the fact that like, man, if my story ended there, then would the galaxy be better? I don't know, but these events definitely would not happen. Yeah. And he also mentions the fact that was 1,000 years ago. So we also get the indication that like Hadrian has an especially long life for a Palatine. He's already mentioned like who have lived longer than anyone else. He's lived over 1,000 years. the Cielson would not be forced to live as our thralls in our alienages. So I looked this up specifically to an alienage in the Solon Empire. It's in the definition in the back of the book, is like a ghetto or a reservation intended for the isolation of the Cenobite population. So totally passed my mind on my first read through is the idea
Yeah,
that he doesn't fully extinct the Cielson by eating the sun, but he extincts them in such a way, like he destroys so much of them in such a way that they have basically been put in on like reservations or in ghettos to isolate them from the rest of the population. So he sort of answers the previous question that he had is like
yeah,
total elimination is impossible. Well, then how does he end the war? I didn't notice until we read this time. It's like, oh, they ultimately, like, some Cielson survived the event and they isolate them.
that is interesting. Yeah,
I know what they say of me, what they call me in your history books, the Sun Eater, the half mortal, demon tongued, regicidal, genocidal. I've heard it all. And as I have said, we are none of us one thing. As the riddle in the Sphinx asked of poor doomed Oedipus, we change. And so he indicates that this moment, if you could pick any moment in his childhood, despite like his relationship with his father, despite anything else, he points to this eating in the back alley, which would otherwise be not a big deal, as the baptism that
yeah.
turns him into the Sun Eater, which I still don't, and we've only read 6 of the 7 books, but like, I still don't understand what that means.
It's so interesting because the way we ended last episode was essentially the decision to be baptized. He leaves,
Oh,
he leaves and he's like, I'm leaving it all behind. And then this is where he gets dunked under the water, fallen down, and we're about to see him sort of rise above the water again. It's a fantastic analogy, like Rockio Catholicism, the whole bit, but like it's very apt considering this. And I also, just as a meta thing, I really appreciate um that the key moment, the turning point for our character is not our character doing something really like cool and powerful. Like the first like important moment we have with him is him getting the crap beat out of him and getting kicked down. It's kind of refreshing, frankly, in kind of the media environment we are now. It's just
mhm.
nice to see your main character get beat up and actually have conflicts.
I think it speaks to something deeper too that we'll see later in the series of like suffering becomes a very,
Yeah,
very important theme. And this is sort of,
yeah.
you could, I guess, call some of the stuff like, oh, my mommy and daddy don't love me. That's suffering to some extent. But this is the first really, I think the baptism, now that I think about it, is the first real suffering that Hadrian experiences.
That's a great point. Yeah,
I didn't think about that until literally just now, but like
yeah.
is why this is the baptism, is because this is the first physical suffering that he has ever experienced in his life. Despite all him being the greatest of all in terms of his upbringing and all this different stuff, he's got every advantage. He turns down the wrong alley and gets fucked up. And that happens. It's what the world does.
And it's his first venture into like the real world,
Yeah.
supposedly too. He goes
Yeah.
down into it and is chewed up and spit back out immediately. And yeah, I love it. Just
He
awesome.
wakes the one more piece before we move into like him actually waking up is like he also at the very end of this first part of the chapter puts the comparison with him and Crispin up, right? So now that he's made this
Yeah.
decision to get baptized and he's actually been baptized, he's been brought low and Crispin has ascended. Like he was triumphant and victorious on the colossal floor and Hadrian is laying dying in a back alley in the middle of
Yeah, it's
downtown or
interesting.
whatever.
The juxtaposition between their key moments is fascinating.
Mhm.
It's man, I feel like you could get super Christian all of a sudden talking about like, like the juxtaposition between like the world's version of what like a messiah would look like, being almost like a heroic Crispin-esque rising to the occasion figure versus like a figure like Hadrian, where Hadrian is like brought low
Mhm.
for the purpose and the origination of something. It's very interesting, the contrast between those two things. Yeah, it's great.
He then wakes up in his room to constellations that he sees on the ceiling. And who is beside his bedside table? None other than his pseudo father, the closest thing that he ever knew to a dad, Gibson, who is like asleep in a chair next to him. This old man
Yeah.
is at his bedside and nursing him. He is plugged full of medical devices and needles. It's interesting. So, like, Hadrian mentions the fact that Gibson is this sort of surrogate fatherly figure,
Yeah,
but we also get the juxtaposition against him as mother as well, right? Because his mother is Hadrian's mother, when she's present, may be doting and may help him and may like be nurturing. But the only time we really see him need nurturing in this story so far is it at this moment, and she's not there either. And so he's
yeah,
sort of like a surrogate parent on both sides. He's giving the nurturing side, he's giving the wisdom, he's admonishing Hadrian when he needs it. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and you know, I think specifically he mentions the idea of scholiasts being the equivalent to stoics.
yeah,
Like the scholiast first training is in the suppression of emotion, the elevation of stoic reason above the winds of mere humanity. And he juxtaposes that with the fact that like Gibson has concern in his gray eyes when looking at Hadrian. So even this person that he's put on this pedestal as like the scoliest of all scholiasts, Gibson is the reason that Hadrian. I mean, we Karn Sagara and Simeon the Red and like these adventure stories of these people, like Simeon the Red in particular, being like the sort of John Carter of Mars, scholiast and explorer. Gibson is the reason that he really wants to be a scholiast.
yeah. The stoicism thing sort of comes up throughout, I think especially through Gibson's character.
Yeah.
Because the way we sort of experience Gibson's affection is through the breaks in his stoicism. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah, it's really interesting, like stoicism essentially, for people that don't know, is essentially this philosophy of, when I was doing my first philosophy class, they give us this like dichotomy between this dude Epicurus and this dude Epictetus. And Epicurus is like, oh, for happiness, human beings must control their environment because environment makes us happy or unhappy depending on our experiences, and thus so we should control our environment to control our experience. And someone like Epictetus is like, no, what makes humans happy or unhappy is our perception and our interaction with how we react to things. So it's actually not about our environment. It's about like sort of the inner commentary we have, the thoughts we tell ourselves, the weight we put on things. And so what we should do to be happy or to be fulfilled is to control excess of emotion. Because if I'm subjecting myself to both the highs and the lows, then I'm sort of floating on the whims of what happens to me and how I react rather than trying to form some central stability through controlling my reactions to what seems more reasonable. There's
Yeah.
connections with modern cognitive behavioral therapy and all this stuff that's less emotionally suppressed and more emotionally reasonable. But Stoicism sort of has this reputation for controlling emotions. And so with Scholius, they have this like sort of Stoicism central amount.
Built in.
So when yeah, it's like, and they're sort of the masters of it in this universe in the way that characters would be in like a Dune kind of universe. But we see the cracks with Gibson in his relationship with Hadrian. And so we don't actually have to see a lot from Gibson for it to have a large amount of weight because he's supposed to be this person that is in control, has a central belief about the control of emotion, and yet he just can't help but have himself feel affectionate towards Hadrian. It's very endearing. It's fantastic, and it really shines through this chapter.
It's a really, really good juxtaposition that you mentioned, though. It's like it also points to the fact that like Hadrian thinks Gibson is the ideal scholiast, and he knows cognitively that like stoicism's an integral part in being a good scholiast. But what endears Hadrian to Gibson beyond as part of his being a scholiast is when he's not being a scholiast. Rocchio specifically talks about the scholiasts and the Stoic philosophy a little bit in his interview with Parker Settecase on Parker's YouTube channel, Parker's Pensays. I'd recommend everybody listen to it. Maybe hold off if you. I don't think that there's spoilers particularly talked about because at the point that the first interview came out was Parker had not read maybe beyond book one, maybe he was starting book two. So be warned that there could be some spoilery nature stuff talked about, but it's a great interview. And he mentions that like Hadrian is a terrible scholiast, right? Like, and at this point in the story, that's evidently true because he can't hold his emotions back. But it's interesting to think about the fact that like maybe he wanted to be a scholiast and desires to be a scholiast on the front lines, when in actuality he wanted to be like Gibson when he was not a scholiast, right? So maybe that like he thinks that like I want to be this thing because the most important figure in my life is one of those things, but Gibson may not be that good of a scholiast either. Like he may do some of the
Yeah.
functions, but he's not like he's out
The
of step
thing
with what the philosophy says.
the thing that makes him human, Gibson, is the fact that he's an imperfect scholiast.
Yeah.
Like he's portrayed it's portrayed as a positive thing, is my feeling from the author. There's something to be said for being reserved and being able to manage your emotions. But, when we're having the previous chapter talk about the subjective experience and the value that comes from experience, um, I think it's fine, like affection and connection, that coming through is what makes this character warm, um, even though he shouldn't be technically
Yeah.
by society standards. But like his warmth is what means he's passing out next to Hadrian in this moment when even his mom and dad aren't trying to
I
be there
just
for
thought
him.
about this too. There's clear like Jedi-esque
Mm,
analogies here that Rocky was making. Gibson would almost be like Qui-Gon Jinn, right?
mm,
If Qui-Gon was loved but did not follow all the rules of the temple, right? Of the
mm,
Jedi High Council and all this different stuff. And that was sort of young Obi-Wan's failure in dealing with Anakin was the fact that he followed too much closely he did not follow the same path that Qui-Gon had set before. And it's sort of, you see the juxtaposition, right? With he loves Anakin, but he also like is very much into the Jedi, right? Like he's a big rule followery guy, and he's sort of like, you shouldn't do this or that. But Obi-Wan's relationship with Luke, right? Like the endearing treatment that he has with Luke is very, very similar to what Gibson is doing with Hadrian here.
yeah,
After he's experienced that super big loss with Anakin becoming Darth Vader. Love that. So he's basically the only guy in the room. Hadrian apparently has been unconscious for 5 days. He spent
yeah.
the first few days in suspension, which another Star Wars reference potentially could be like Luke in a back to tank sort of situation. Hadrian tries to
It
move
just
after
he
Gibson
just
tells him not
passes
to and
out.
just immediately passes out, which is hilarious.
Yeah, it's
Um,
great.
he wakes up again, and then still none of his Gibson's still there, and neither of his parents are in the room.
Yeah,
Um, and so we get this juxtaposition again. Is like, okay, Alistair's escape from his fatherly duties is his work. Liliana's escape from her motherly duties is this hedonism. Regardless, both of them leave. I think it's the first time in the book where he sort of realized like he sort of scolded her for not being around that much when they had their first conversation.
yeah,
This is the point where he's like, oh, mom hurts me just as much as dad because neither of them were here in my moment of most need.
yeah.
And that's another point where Gibson sort of like lets the mask slip and like, you know, shows his emotion and how sad that makes him, because he also then emphasizes that Liliana should really be there and not him.
Which is so out of place. Like, there's no universe where he should be saying that.
Right.
Like he
Right.
should not say that. Like that's like probably a dangerous thing to say
Mm-hmm.
in this situation for him.
Because not only is she like Hadrian's mom, and that's even if she just married into the family, she's also the daughter of like the vicereign of the system. So that's
Yeah,
like saying the first lady, like somebody in the first family. I don't know, speaking about them, you're right. It's very, very dangerous. He then lets Hadrian know that like, hey, they found the boys that assaulted you and they killed them, and that Gibson has like, you see him break again when he has this sort of shame come over his face as he mentions to Hadrian that his father would like to see him when he's better, which is like, imagine you're in a hospital bed and your teacher tells you, hey, your dad's expecting you whenever you can make it. Like that would be just a dagger in the heart.
it's a really well written couple of sentences because you really feel like it just hurts Gibson to
Yeah.
say it. Like it
Yeah.
just hurts to have to. It's like he just like deeply disagrees with what's happening, and yet he's bound by obligation to pass these words on. Like to have to say his dad's words with his mouth. It's
Mhm.
just yeah. It's very well written, very dagger to the heart.
And so we sort of then move on to this discussion that like Hadrian's pissed that like, how dare his father say
Yeah,
that to him? And they start talking about the differences between Alistair and Hadrian. And Gibson tells Hadrian to his face that his father thinks he's too soft to rule and has for longer than the events of what we've seen in the story so far. So this has been
Yeah.
a deep held belief that Alistair has about Hadrian that extends beyond the scope of all of that we've talked about in the book. And then he calls him, Alistair, a carnivore, a true predator. And then brings up probably the biggest Gibsonism that we've had on the podcast
It's
so
huge.
far.
It's huge.
This is he asks Hadrian to recite for him the 8 forms of obedience. So will you, our night lictor, recite the 8 forms of obedience for us?
Yeah, so we've got obedience out of the fear of pain, obedience out of the fear of the other, obedience out of the love for the person of the patriarch, obedience out of loyalty to the office of the patriarch, obedience out of respect for the laws of man and of heaven, obedience out of piety, obedience out of compassion, and obedience out of devotion.
Yeah. So
super interesting. And he has a follow-up question, which is, what is the basest form of obedience? And they are like the fear of pain, which is called the law of the fishes,
which is a reference that I didn't know I think the Sanskrit or the Hindu, in Sanskrit, I think it's written Matsya Nyaya, law of the fishes, which is an ancient Indian concept in Hinduism that describes the chaotic state where the powerful exploit the weak, much like the bigger fish devouring the smaller ones. There's always a bigger fish, right? If we look back to episode 1, I didn't know that was a reference to the Hindu scriptures, but it is.
Have you heard of Kohlberg's stages of moral development before?
No.
Okay, so there's this theory. If you take a Psych 101 class, you're going to get like 400 stages of development things taught to you. One of them that's often taught is called Kohlberg's stages of moral development. Level 1 is this idea of this pre-conventional morality, which is like young children and stuff like that. The basest form of morality that is under this theory is obedience out of avoidance of punishment. Okay, it's your actions are judged by your ability to avoid pain. Essentially, how do I avoid pain? How do I avoid my parents' punishment? This kind of thing. It sort of goes on to develop to like self-interest, like what's in it for me, and then sort of gets more conventional in stage 2 with like, how do I gain approval from others? And then we have like law and order, and then we get things like social contract theory about our relationships with other people's, and then above that, above everything, we have sort of like appeal to universal principles, even above law. So it's
ideals.
Ideals. It's interesting to me that these forms of obedience aren't precisely that, but they're very similar to that sort of view, is that we sort of have this escalating scale of differences in it's obedience, but it's also like a form of like morality that's sort of being laid out by these 8 forms of obedience, with Hadrian having a deep value disagreement with his father, essentially. That is obedience through fear of pain. He's this deeply rooted, like, kill or be killed, fear of pain obedience guy.
Realpolitik, like you mentioned.
Yes. And Hadrian is not that. And from his dad's point of view, that is a problem, because it's not a difference of opinion. That's the way that you have to rule in this universe.
And you got it. It sounds like Alistair thinks you got it or you don't. And Crispin got it and Hadrian don't, right?
Yeah.
And in doing so, Gibson mentions the fact that this is almost, he doesn't mean to do it, but it's a compliment that Alistair is paying him with this lack of approval, saying that if we were to, I mean, you and I can put moral standing on each one of those forms of obedience, or in that hierarchy that you just mentioned, that development that you just mentioned, right? Hadrian's way further along the line in the forms of obedience than his father is. And that says something about him as a person, right? Gibson says, because you're not this way, he doesn't think that you can rule, but I see it as a compliment, because essentially you value these higher morals, right? Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a sense of which, at this point in the story, where Hadrian falls amongst these 8 forms? Because dad is pain. I can't decide if, at this point in the story, Hadrian is some form of something to do with compassion or something like that. He tries to have this like sort of reflexive, understanding point of view, but it doesn't feel like he perfectly fits in a particular spot quite yet. Dad
I,
feels
I
very
think
clear.
I think it actually at this point in the story, based on looking at them right now, just as a reminder for the readers, fear of pain, which is the basis that law of vicious, fear of the other, love for the person of the hierarch, loyalty to the office of the hierarch, respect for the laws of men in heaven, piety, compassion, devotion. I think Hadrian is probably, he doesn't display love for the person or loyalty to
Yeah.
the office of the hierarch. If anything, it's probably respect for the laws of men in heaven. If this is a sliding scale on one direction, I think he has these ideals that he upholds at this point. Granted, he has no reason why these ideals have yet to be tested in his
Yeah.
estimation, but he has this idealism about him that sort of says to me, this is the way that the world should be. We shouldn't have Colosso, it's barbaric. And it's probably
Yeah.
because of his education. But
I think
he
you're right.
doesn't have piety, right? He outright scorns piety, especially because his version of piety is in the form of the chantry.
Yeah.
He d- he has some compassion, right? He shows some compassion with the people that are dying of cancer in the mines and things like that, wanting to help them.
Also
But
with
he's not
the
particularly devoted
Cielson,
either.
he's giving this like sort of reflexive like empathy towards
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Cielson. He's giving them more credit. It's a little unclear whether it's because like there's a central value that he's adhering to about like maybe that's like the respect for the laws of men and of heaven, or whether they think there's some value higher than the society he lives in or something like that.
Mhm.
But the naivete that may be present with sort of because compassion can be naive. And so I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that's where he is too. It's really
He's somewhere right there,
he's somewhere in there in the mix,
but
but
not
definitely
pious.
and not pious, and definitely in contradiction with the fear of pain. Just completely
And not
conflicts with him.
devotion, not devotion either. He's clearly, he doesn't know how to do this whole struggle that he's had, at least at the beginning of these two chapters, is he doesn't know where his devotion should go, right? He
Yeah.
thought he was going to devote himself to this way of life, and he's doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So, and clearly he feels none of those things with his father, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he doesn't obey. He doesn't follow these things. So he gets hurt by his father's own actions. We continue to talk about Alistair as developed, because we also have to think about the fact that like Gibson taught Alistair too. We don't talk about that much. It comes up later in the story a little bit, but Gibson has been there longer than Alistair's been alive. So he's been in service he's known Alistair his entire life. So he's speaking from he's sort of speaking to Hadrian's perception of Alistair.
Yeah.
And he makes this statement that all Alistair wants to do, or all he wants to do, is squeeze, which I think is a clear reference also to Baron Harkonnen's command to Beastraban to like, Raban, I want you to squeeze, Arrakis.
Yeah.
He just wants to milk the power, get a higher station, and as much uranium as he possibly can in his current role.
There's this really fascinating line about this attitude being the thing
Squeezing.
that destroyed Earth.
Yeah.
And there's also this commentary is like, what does it look like in a universe when you can squeeze everything out of something and then planet hop to the next place
and get it and have a better job, right?
Yeah.
As part of the result of you squeezing means that you get a promotion, right? I think it's a contradiction. Not only is it Rocchio saying like, hey, the way that we do capitalism to some extent has got to change, because if it's a race to the bottom, then we are going to destroy Earth. And in his universe, that's exactly how it happened, right? The Americani raced to the bottom, and we destroyed the environment, we destroyed the planet, and old Earth is gone.
Yeah, it's interesting because this sort of adheres to something that may be something about the laws of men in heaven or something like that, which is like Hadrian still thinks it's wrong to squeeze everything out of something if you can just plan it. Like there's almost like this central value. It's like, even if it works technically because there's other things to squeeze, you still shouldn't do it. Like there's something about the act of doing it that is wrong in and of itself, even if you can technically get away with it because you're not destroying your own place. Like, why would you do it if it were wrong? It's sort of the feeling that I got. And it seems like, what was coming to mind when I was reading this section is like, it seems like Hadrian is appealing to something about like an actual moral code rather than things just being like this utilitarian nightmare of a universe. Is like, it's like, no, like even if you've got another world to hop to, like why would you squeeze everything out of your popular, that's a wrong thing you're doing, even if the outcomes appear on the surface to be better. This is sort of a counter to the practicality of his utilitarian, cruel father.
And it goes back to Hadrian's sort of concern for the plebeian.
Yeah, yeah.
Hadrian may not understand the consequences of the affairs of state at this form, like of him breaking the rules and not obeying the forms, at least in relationship to the way that Palatines work. But he clearly understands that the way that Palatines grasp power and hold on to power leads to destruction of planets, leads to destruction of all of the lives on those planets. And now that I think about it, if we were to take a cynical view, do you think that this could potentially be him like obfuscating blame to some extent on like, well, I destroyed one planet and one sun, and I know that that's bad, but hey, humanity's been destroying planets ever since we came off of Earth.
I don't know. It is interesting.
It's a cynical view, admittedly.
It is interesting too, because if the theme is it's wrong, even if the utility maps out and makes sense, it's interesting that we could have Hadrian doing something that may appear on its face wrong because the math works out. It does appear to be a contradiction in some way, at least for what we know about what's going on thus far. Like, you better have some pretty good reasons to rationalize this action you're going to do if you're saying like you can't just do bad things because of good outcomes. Seems kind of a contradiction. So it's definitely worth thinking about. I didn't think about that, but you're right. It is a contradiction, at least as it's presented this way.
And it's narrator Hadrian that's writing this, not young Hadrian, right? So that's something to keep in mind. He then like passes out and it has this like fever dream about the death of his grandmother, which we note that this is the first experience. I mean, the first time he's ever experienced death. And this is his paternal grandmother, not his maternal, because she's still alive. But this is the first time he's seen a dead body, presumably in his life, of a Palatine.
It is, I think, the first dream sequence we've got in the series so far. Just get excited, folks, because Brachio has the best dream sequences.
The best.
Ever.
The best.
Like, so I think some people are confused by them. I think they're extremely readable and clear. Like, in the landscape of dream sequences, like really, really well written, really great, and really understandable. Like I feel like a lot of the subtext is really.
It takes some rereading to understand them, but they are so well written that like every time you go back to it, it's like, what?
It's like there.
What?
It's there on the page.
It's there.
Some of this stuff is so obscure when you read it, just like you don't even know what's happening. I feel like this is a really good example of like just really great stuff. You know, we've got this scene where we've got this first encounter with death, and it's the funeral of his father's mother, and we have like all sorts of weird, trippy stuff going on.
He's involved in it. He's holding.
Yeah.
It's a mix of Roman tradition in this universe and Egyptian, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about the death masks that were on the door. I don't know if we talked about it, but essentially the big door that they had that Hadrian barged into, and in that foyer, like there are death masks of 31 generations of Marlows looking down on him. So we get that sort of death mask Roman image, but we also get this image of Hadrian's like holding her eyes in this jar as part of this ceremony, which is one, super creepy. But then he goes, presumably there's a statue where they're bringing this stuff to.
Yeah.
And he sees the statue that's covered in a cloth. And then he takes the cloth off to find out that it's not his grandmother that's under the cloth, but his dad. And then that statue of marble attacks him and sort of shakes him out of this dream.
Yeah. It's interesting that father sort of like becomes death in this. Yeah, because he's sort of like becomes the embodiment of this. Also interesting, as we'll see, like, you know, like with some implications in the next, that he's holding eyes, which is sort of fascinating. You know, he wakes and sees, you know, Gibson, but we also have this like vision where like Gibson has a slit nostril and he's marked as a criminal, and he insists, he's a little confused. He's like not really sure as a narrator about if he's going back and like sort of retroactively creating this memory, but he sort of stakes himself. He's like, no, like I would pretty much bet my life that I saw this happen like before anything went wrong. And you're like, what is that? Like, what the heck does that mean?
He specifically says, I saw it happen before it happened. So, right, like now we're getting an indication from narrator Hadrian that something goes wrong, and Gibson gets his nostril cut.
Yeah.
But he could swear that it was at this moment that was the first time that he saw it, but definitely it wasn't that way before the dream happened. So it's a beautiful way of doing it on Rocchio's part to like give us this fever dream where he wakes up in a cold sweat, essentially.
Yeah.
And then like, is it his mind playing tricks on him as a result? Is he still kind of dreaming or whatever? But he would swear that he saw the outcome of an event that has yet to happen before it happens.
Yeah. And with all the pieces sort of melding together, we've got Hadrian walking into death. Dad is death. He's holding eyes, which may be some kind of foresight metaphor. And now Gibson, amidst dad, death, foresight, is a criminal. It's like this whole thing. And he's like, yeah, and I saw it before it happened. And you're like, what the hell? What the hell does that mean? And it's just like, and there's this line of like, I was
the best line in the book so far. I will stake my life on it. This is the best line in the book so far.
I was old and then young again before I understood. And you're like, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
what does that mean?
That doesn't follow the 4 legs, then 3 legs, then 2 legs, then 3. He was old and then young again before he understood. So weird.
Yeah.
But if we were to put a pin in any line so far, that one is one that we will refer back to.
Definitely.
And that sort of gives us, it's the last line of the chapter, which is awesome. Rocchio, you're the best. But then we move on to our final chapter of this episode. Chapter 9, Bread and Circuses. So at this point, Hadrian is somewhat healed. Maybe it's been a week or two since the events of his fever dream. He then follows his father's instructions and then is summoned by him and goes to meet him. So he's still not fully healed. He's still in a cast, he mentions, but he's making this decision to go see his dad, essentially, with the cast on and all this different stuff. Maybe he's going early, right? It almost feels like he's going a little bit early.
Like as soon as he's able to, basically, is the feeling that I got. Like, I'm going to go like limping in there.
Yeah. You should feel bad for not visiting me. Like, look how bad I'm hurt. Like, you should
defiantly.
Feel bad.
Yeah. Something that was interesting as he goes, like he's going in, he thanks this guard guy, Raban, for saving his life twice.
The Knight Lector.
Yeah. He kind of brushes it off. He's like, no, but like seriously, like thank you for doing that. It's this sort of like continual thing that Hadrian does, where he just like sort of breaks social conventions to do something that on its face seems like a cool thing, like so expressing appreciation for something like this. It's one of the ways in which he breaks social convention, and it feels good. It doesn't feel like, oh, you're being naive. It feels like you're doing like a good thing, which is interesting. So I thought it was worth mentioning.
When in this case, doing the good thing was killing teenagers, right? Essentially.
Sure. Yeah. Saving his life. Yeah.
Well, he did save his life, but also like presumably
not good.
Yeah.
Not good stuff.
We get a little bit more of world building about Raban regarding the class system, the hierarchical system. So we know that at the bottom are the serfs or the plebeians. We know that in some cases and in some worlds, there's a way to circumvent the normal human life cycle via, if you have enough money, essentially, to get these aftermarket genetics. But there's also this patrician class, which are people that serve as plebeians that have gained the favor of the Palatine ruler and have essentially been given the right from their Palatine rulers specifically to be uplifted to this class, and that comes with genetic modifications, and it means that they get life extension, and presumably they get, they look younger, they look better, they have, all these better genetics. They're not born perfect like the Palatine, but like these aftermarket genetic enhancements lift them up to, at least in a conversation, they can live way longer. And I think Hadrian specifically calls, going back to the theme of like what is human and what is not human. Clearly, he says patricians are mutants, which is so ironic in the idea that like he came out of a vat, but he's more pure because he came out of a vat. It makes no sense.
It's completely contradictory. And also put a pin in it. Like this will come up again. Like this sort of stuff where like people are genetically modified. Like all the class sort of stuff is like important to just like put a pin in and remember because it'll come up again. So yeah.
He talks Raban is talking to him before he goes in. In comparison, the last time Raban was the guy stopping him at the door. This time he sort of lets him in, and he looks at him and in Latin says, "We who are about to die salute you," which is a reference to what the gladiators in old times said before they, died. Also a reference to the movie Gladiator. But he says it to him in Latin, and Raban's like, "What?" And then Hadrian's like, "It's Latin, Raban," and then just walks in. So he sort of sees this as like,
It's
well,
so
I guess I'm gonna die.
So dramatic. So just like saying something in a language that he's not going to understand just for
Just a
like
know-it-all.
it's an audience of one. Just
Yeah,
like
totally.
yeah. And he walks in, and I just love the presence of Alistair. He walks in, and dude is just like at his desk, like reading shit, and like I am just picturing him stamping stuff, pretending like he doesn't notice his crippled son walking. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. He just doesn't say anything, doesn't even look at him when he walks in the room. Got better things to do than address my injured son.
And then
It's insanity.
the best part of that afterwards is like when he finally recognizes Hadrian being in the room, he looks at him and they don't talk at all. There's just pure silence. And they have this like staring contest between palatines, which again, you can imagine would take forever. But Hadrian specifically calls out the fact that like patience is a virtue, and it's a virtue you can afford kind of when you have 600 years of life, 500, 600 years of life.
Yeah.
But Alistair's station doesn't afford him that patience. And so he's like, I know he's busier than me, so I'm going to stare this man down until he has to look away because I know that he's super busy. He's going to break first. And it's sort of his like way of one-upping his dad. He takes these little tiny things to try and one-up his dad, man. Walking and staring contests.
Yes. The first of, I think, several staring contests in the Sun Eater universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part one. And then they start talking, and Alistair just like immediately starts blaming Hadrian for it. Like zero empathy, just like, this is your fault. Why were you there? That's like his concern. Like, what are you doing in the city? And
and then
Hadrian,
he's just walking home, and then Alistair's like, walking home?
Yeah, I love this line where Alistair responds to him, walking period home. Each word was a manifesto. It's just the presence of just it's like, I feel like we've all been Hadrian getting talked to like this, but you can feel it like, oh crap, I know exactly what that feels like. But it's just intense. They're fighting over like his health. Hadrian's like, why do you care about why I was there, not if I'm okay? Like, why are you so focused on this? And Hadrian's clearly very upset about it.
We go back to the 8 forms of obedience because now, and to Alistair's overall theme of Hadrian is an extension of his legacy, not a person.
Yeah.
He only calls Hadrian out by name when he's in trouble. He does never call Hadrian by name when he's not. And since Alistair rules out of this fear of pain and like the grip on power is one thing, he has this inextricable view of the distance between the serfs and him, the plebeians and him. And that only exists in wars. And Hadrian, this is another case where Hadrian doesn't understand the consequences of his actions because maybe he has a different moral lens.
Yes.
Where he says that Hadrian's showing that Palatines are that vulnerable potentially, or that human potentially, is threatening to their power on the planet. And as a result of it, he's placed a curfew on that district, and anybody outside of that curfew is immediately shot, right? Like, so in this moment of vulnerability for Hadrian is just seeking comfort. In this moment of vulnerability for his house, Alistair locks the place down and kills anybody on the streets after a certain hour.
Yeah.
That is the only way a man can govern a dog, boy. It's just like, it's this
insane.
guy.
I think it's worth pausing on the forms of obedience because the previous chapter plays so much into the themes of this chapter, just insofar as the implications of what it means for their worldview. Because if you have this central tenet, which is, like you rule out of fear of pain, what does that mean about like how you have to be as a leader? It means if they're fearing punishment and pain from me, it means I have to always be a particular way. Because if I lose that thread, then the entire thing falls apart.
Yeah, the house of cards falls.
That's exactly right. To maintain this is something that's interesting if you think about the implications in like psychology and stuff like this. And the reason that punishment is a problematic form of reinforcing a behavior is because if you remove the punishing arm, the behavior falls apart because in absence of the punisher, the behavior doesn't persist. So
Yeah.
you must maintain a grip that is iron, or this just doesn't work. It's not even just a matter of disagreement or opinion or ethics. You can only do this living this way, having this ego. We have to seem impenetrable. There can be no threat to us. They have to always be under the boot. They have to know that if they step out of line, they immediately get punished, or that it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just what it was constantly throwing up in my head was just like, not even just the value that's present there, but like, what does it look like if we pick a different form of obedience? Like, what would it
Yeah.
mean if the form of obedience was devotion or something like that? What would it mean if a population was dedicated and devoted to its leader? What would it mean if
Hmm.
that leader was hurt or sacrificed something or seemed mortal amidst people that were devoted to him? That looks more like sacrifice than weakness, which is interesting. Is actually generate maybe even more devotion to the person willing to face harm, because the fact that they can bleed, the fact that they can hurt, actually reinforces that form of devotion in a way that it undermines this form of devotion or this form of obedience. It's very fascinating, the implications
Beautiful.
of the way, yeah, it's perfect illustration of like Hadrian can't work with this because Hadrian won't, he's incongruent with this. There's no
Mhm.
world where Hadrian can be this because he's not this, and he can never be this.
Going to the theme that you were mentioning about devotion specifically, sacrifice and devotion are two major tenets of this story, and they're
Yeah,
being like inextricably, or they're being compared to. I guess this is the first time they're sort of comparing that to each other. The pillars for Alistair are pain,
yeah,
image, right, propaganda, right. It's clear totalitarian
yeah,
governance here, right?
mhm,
That's not the only thing that Hadrian has done wrong in this situation. He also left Colosso, right? So this is another
yeah, yeah,
case, another strike that went down from Alistair's standpoint, because not only did he leave Colosso when his brother was fighting in Colosso and was supposed to be there on the Archon's behalf and representing the house. This is another dichotomy of like the individual versus the family legacy. Alistair is mad at Hadrian leaving Colosso because he was seen leaving the box. And
yeah,
because he was seen leaving the box, what that tells to the people is that they are scorned because their ruler isn't there with them and enjoying this thing. So if one pillar is that pain and locking a district down, another pillar that Alistair mentioned specifically is bread and circuses, right? This old Roman ideal that if you can do whatever you want from a totalitarian standpoint, like the end of the Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire was essentially totalitarian rule to some extent when the Senate was taken away or dismantled in such a way that they were ineffective and the people were just given bread to eat. They were punished for things that they did wrong very harshly, and they were given circuses to enjoy. And that was enough to suppress them. This, Alistair says, they won't fear you after this because not only has he been hurt, but he's
yeah,
scorned the Colosso. You're done. There's no way that you could rule at this point because in Alistair's mind, ruling by fear of pain is the only way to rule.
yeah,
Bread and circuses in particular is typically attributed to the Roman poet Juvenal, who was born in 55 AD and died in 128 AD. He was a satirist and he was alive at the same time as the Emperor Hadrian, right? So just it brings it all back together, Brachio, with
that's
these
funny.
things.
I was just gonna say it's interesting that there's commentary here about Hadrian spurning the games. You know,
Yeah.
we have the end of the last episode talking about how Hadrian really has like a lot of disdain for the violence and the terror. And when Hadrian sort of makes this decision to separate himself from the world, like the world reacts. You know,
Mhm.
they feel the condemnation present. It's like, hey, I know that like y'all are all enjoying this. Like, I actually think y'all are all being cruel and terrible for clapping at this thing. And that's not just destabilizing for the government, but I mean, it just turns the people against Hadrian in a way that um it it means, like the implications of that decision aren't just like that Hadrian exits for Hadrian reasons. Like it's like no, he forced himself to exit because he's essentially saying my ethics are different than y'all. Y'all are being bad doing this. There's no way to undo that. Like
Yeah.
you've lost the approval of the people because you've set yourself apart. You're now different than them. There's no undoing it. It's an ethical thing. He's made it clear through that he's not approving. He has
Ethical
genuinely
versus
exited the world.
practical, right? Like
Yep.
Alistair is
Yep.
all about the
Yep.
practicality of keeping power, and
Yep.
these games are a distraction to ensure that the plebeians not only not rebel, think that they don't have the right to rebel. So not
Yep.
only are they getting restrictions from tech or whatever, but like the bread and the circuses and the punishment keeps them distracted and pleased enough, even with like the cycle of the giving of rights and taking away of rights that we talked about before.
Yep.
These are all part of this house of cards that this society stands on. And the moment that one of them calls off, it all falls apart. Because if the plebeians start thinking that they have a right to rebel, they have the numbers. I mean, the Palatines have the
Yeah.
technology, but they have the numbers. There's no doubt.
Yeah. They can't even do step one, which is to think that
Yeah.
they have any right to even object. Because again, this house of cards falls if they even entertain the idea that it's possible.
Yeah.
They have to know that it's not.
And from Alistair's perspective, this is the only way
Yeah.
that order can be maintained at a galactic scale. Like civilization on a galactic scale is impossible without this framework in his mind. We may or may not see that proven to be true. That's definitely the way that it works in this province, in this prefecture. We'll find out later if that also extends beyond the scope of what Alistair has control over. And then they have this discussion, this argument about other places that have other planets and things like that. And Alistair scoffs at the idea that like they have city states, like countries exist on these planets. You're saying those people have order? That's purely chaos.
Yeah.
So he sort of sees order as this totalitarian grip and this rule.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see the dichotomy too, where Crispin is embraced by the people.
They love him now.
They
It
do
is
love
it
him.
is it isn't just dad approval
Mm-hmm.
now, because it's their behavior is manifested in the approval or lack thereof in the population because of their behavior, which is interesting because Hadrian is our protagonist, and we're gonna like obviously Rocky is making some central ethical themes being present here, but our quote unquote like character that's going to be like central to this ethical thing he's trying to do is rejected for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It isn't by high class and low class. The world is rejecting him, and the world is loving Crispin
Yeah.
for getting in there, cutting people up, playing the game.
So from there, the last part of this conversation, Alistair essentially tells Hadrian, well, it's clear now that you're totally incapable of leading.
Yeah.
You have made that decision for yourself when you left that box. And now that you've been hurt, no chance. You're out. Go back to the dugout. But we're trading you to a different team, right? He tells Hadrian that essentially now, because you've done that, you are now going to join the chantry. So now you're going to seminary, and this group that Hadrian has like white knuckled at every mention of them, he's now being told that he's going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Which is disinheriting him from his station, which Hadrian, being the oldest boy and entitled, cries and says, like, I'm the oldest. We've always done it this way. But Alistair is playing his cards, the hand that he has dealt from his perspective. And from his standpoint, the implication that we're getting here is Alistair wants somebody on the inside to elevate the family's position. You can be great in this. Like, you can help the family. Like, the purpose of me sending you here is for advancement of our line and of our family.
Yeah.
Delos and Maidwa Prefecture is not the goal. The goal is higher and constant advancement.
Yeah.
And this is his next step.
There's like a threat beyond what he can control in the chantry. And it's like, okay, what do I do with my delinquent that I cannot control? It's like, well, I guess I'll put him somewhere that I don't have control over, and we can get some footholds there. There's also this line where they're arguing, and And Alistair insists that he address him as sire or my lord, and it feels like almost in that line, it's just like sort of demarcating like this is the end of their relationship as
Yeah.
father and son. Like it is no long. This is no longer father and son. This is like we're done. You are going to respect this station. You're going to go do this thing, and that's it. There's nothing left to say. Like you've ended our relationship. This is the decision I've made, and I'm not your dad anymore. You're going to address me by my station, not by the fact that I'm your dad.
And it's beautifully written because essentially Alistair is nothing but a sire, right? If we think of the idea of siring a child,
Yeah,
many men who leave their families and don't take responsibility for their kids are siring children, but they're not a father. And so this sort
yeah,
of the fact that he's saying, you will address me as sire or my lord, hammers home the fact that like Gibson is his true dad in this
yeah,
situation. And not only that, Hadrian tries to fight back saying like, hey, I don't want to join the chantry. I want to be a scholiast. I want to be this adventurer. It's,
yeah.
I sort of picture it like a kid who is telling his parents when he's young that I want to be
A musician.
a musician or whatever. But I thought about another one earlier today when I was going back over this again. The equivalent for Hadrian wanting to be a scholiast and be part of the expeditionary corps, which is what he says that he wants to do. He doesn't want to be part of the chantry, is specifically like a kid who watches Indiana Jones and
Yeah,
says, I want to be an archaeologist, right? That's
yeah,
the
yeah,
equivalency here.
yeah,
It's not, thousands and thousands of hours in the library and dusting off old bones and studying them. It's, I want to get Coronado's cross and return it to a museum, right? Like it's this totally childlike view of what scholiasts really do. And it's enforced primarily by his reading of these novels and of these histories of people like Simeon the Red.
because
But
he
it's
wants to be like
also,
this like heroic guy, which is
yeah,
not really like it's
he
very
wants to be an
naive.
adventurer.
Yeah, yeah,
He doesn't want to be a scholiast. He wants to be an adventurer. He wants to be an explorer. He wants to be this figure of myth almost. He wants that for himself. And his dad is like, well, you meet the requirements for this in such a way. You speak all these languages. You could be part of the Inquisition. I think he specifically says you could be part of the synod, right? Like you could be in the synod, like the highest level of this religious organization. And I think Alistair honestly believes him because not only does he meet the bill for like he could take the path of, okay, you start in the Inquisition, you speak all these languages, you then can progress from being in the Inquisition if you do it well enough to being one of the highest people in power at this organization, although
yeah,
religious, that has maybe the same power as the emperor. The emperor, the indications that we have so far is that the emperor's grip on power is almost enforced by the chantry. And he's saying, you can't be emperor, but you could come pretty damn close. And that's my goal in putting you in here. So he kind
yeah.
of pays him a compliment, but it's totally from a utilitarian standpoint, like you mentioned earlier.
It makes sense. It's just inhuman to do to your son.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we have this sort of bomb dropped at the end, which is that this isn't just like a theoretical thing. This is happening imminently. Like it's
Yeah.
happening quickly. It's we've got like 3 months left on Delos. He wants him gone. We're not doing this. You're playing any more games. You're not going to go down any more streets and get beat up or anything. Like you are going. You're going to be useful, and that's the end of it. Before you
Yeah.
can be, yeah,
Get
you're
out of
not
my
going to be here
sight
anymore.
and you're leaving because you are a hindrance to our power. You are an embarrassment. But he also like admits that like they need someone on their side in this. But
Yeah,
Alistair gives him this timeline saying like, I can't afford to have you around longer than that because you're a loose cannon and you can embarrass me or relax our grip on power in that time. So as quickly as possible, you're getting off this planet and you're going to seminary. And
yeah.
Hadrian then just wants to like yell at him. His father raises his voice, basically says, it's decided, it's done. Hadrian almost yells at him, and then he just turns on his heel and walks out of the room. And that's the end of chapter 9.
What will Hadrian do with this
Yeah,
news?
I can't,
Find
it's
out.
going to be interesting to see if he decides to go be a priest. That'd be an interesting take and turn for the story.
Is that how he kills this Yeltsin? He becomes the hierarch of the I don't. Who knows?
Synod, maybe. But
Yeah,
that's all for us today. Drew, thank you again. It's always a pleasure when we do this. And as we will leave every episode, always forward,
and always down.
and we will see you next time.
See you, folks.
Devil's Rest Book Club is Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Today's episode discussed chapters 7, 8, and 9 of Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio, copyright 2018. Empire of Silence was originally published by Daw Books, an imprint of Astra Publishing House, on July 3, 2018. Quality editing and original music by Cameron Elston. Find us on YouTube. Contact us at devilsrestbookclub@gmail.com. Devil's Rest Book Club is a production of Disquiet Pods. This episode, copyright 2025, Cameron Elston and Drew Welty. Thanks for joining us, and remember, rage is blindness.